Okay, I know other people are going to be joining here in a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming to our ROCS summer webinar series. Yes, it is still summer, even though school is back. Where I'm located here, Marty, it was 97 degrees yesterday. So I'm hoping summer will continue for a few more weeks. And it's great to have everyone here today as part of our series. My name is Stuart Meese. I'm the Director of North Carolina Operations for ROCS Grad Staffing. And today we're going to talk about the impact of AI on recruiting from one of the smartest guys that I've known for many, many years. And I'm going to introduce him shortly. So just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording this, so it will be made available to you afterwards, but would love to hear your questions moving forward. So under the Q&A button here in the Zoom webinar, submit your questions. I'll weave them into our natural discussion. If we have any afterwards, we'll ask those as well. Sit back, listen, participate. We want this to be something very helpful and the most timely of topics that we've heard so much about. But before we get going, I just want to share a little bit for those of you that may be unaware of ROCS. ROCS Grad Staffing was started by two founders, Tom Moore, Brandon Labman, about 20 years ago out of the dorm room at George Mason, helping their friends get jobs and whatnot. Fast forward 20 years later, being located, the headquarters is in Reston, Virginia, outside of where Dulles Airport is, outside of Washington, D.C. 4 Inc. 5000 designations since then, one of the best places to work in the Washington, D.C. area, as well as one of the best staffing firms to work for. And we focus exclusively on early career talent, 0 to 5 year talent. Here's some of the positions that we fill, whether it's full-time contract positions, temp jobs. You can see some of the jobs that we fill, a wide variety of those. And we take pride in getting the top, most qualified candidates for our clients. And we really work hard for our clients, providing the best service to this space as possible. So that's a little bit about ROCS. Let me tell you a little bit about our featured speaker here, panelist member today, a guy named Marty Martin, who I have just the utmost respect for, have for quite some time. This guy's an innovator. He's a risk taker. He understands markets. He thinks in a very logical way, not afraid to make a decision. And I've learned so much from him from when we first got to know each other back in Roanoke. And we were both intrigued by just technology in general, how social media was coming out, how search engine optimization was working. And we could tell stories about a lot of different things. And we did tell a lot of stories. You remember my Roanoke story, Marty? We did that to try and promote Roanoke, Virginia. I mean, we have so many tales, and I'm just so proud of him and what he's been able to accomplish with Locomotive Agency. I'm going to let him tell a little bit more about what he's doing. I found out another nugget. I'm not going to say what it is. We may not be ready to share that yet. But Marty was also featured in Inc. 5000, one of the fastest growing companies, and has received numerous awards for their work in the search engine optimization space. And I think you're in for a real treat today to really hear his insight and the way that he can communicate this topic of artificial intelligence, chat GPT. So Marty, welcome. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you for the really, really kind introduction and making me feel profoundly uncomfortable.
Well, tell us a little bit more about yourself, your company, what you guys do, and then we're going to use that as a basis to get in the topic of conversation today.
Well, I mean, I would be remiss without saying that when we met, years ago, you taught me a lot about the value of networking and how important that was, and that has actually contributed to a lot of my success. So thank you for that. But Locomotive,
I haven't gotten that dividend check yet,
yeah,
so maybe
know,
that
right?
come in.
It's coming. It's coming.
Okay.
Well, Locomotive, so we're a full service digital marketing agency. So put simply, if you know what SEO and paid media and content creation are for websites, that's what we do. If you're not sure what that is, we help people sell more of their product and service online. This is a simple way of putting that. But we are 25 people strong, fully remote after the pandemic. We are in the process of an acquisition, which is the nugget that Stuart was mentioning. Can't say who, because that's still kind of under wraps, but we'll effectively double our size in about a week.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that. So I'm going to move to the next slide here, and it seems like every day there's always something new about artificial intelligence and AI and how it's impacting our lives and so forth. And I just want to start with the basics because I don't know people's understanding. I think they probably know enough about it to be intrigued to sign up for a session such as this. But what the heck is AI, Chat GPT, any other buzzwords that you want to use associated with this? And how does it work, Marty? I mean,
Yeah.
the basic stuff here. How does this stuff work?
Well, so much depends on what a person means when they use an acronym like AI, which obviously, well, maybe obviously, but it is short for artificial intelligence, and that's a spectrum of meaning. But for the purposes of this conversation, ChatGPT, ChatGPT is generative AI, and generative AI is it allows a user to quickly generate new content or new media based on a variety of inputs, and that's facilitated through what's called a large language model. And a large language model is a deep learning algorithm that's been developed on a corpus of content. And in the instance of ChatGPT, it's basically been trained on the entire internet. There are actually databases that the last time I looked, it was petabytes of data that you can download. That's like a crawl of as much of the internet as you can get. And ChatGPT has been trained based on that. So it does a lot of things pretty well. It's not as great as it can be or will be someday. And there are ways to improve it. But yeah, and if you're interested, I actually looked it up. ChatGPT stands for Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Yeah, that would be a trivia question in about 50 years, probably.
Yeah. But I mean, the technology basically works. You type in a prompt. So it's a chat-based tool. If you haven't seen it, you just type in a prompt. Like I've used it for a variety of different things. For instance, I'm not a great letter writer, and if I need to send an email that sounds nice, I can write a prompt that says, imagine that you're the CEO of a digital marketing agency and you need to write a letter to your employees that says blah, 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 and does this, 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 and make sure you mention that. And it'll do it. And it actually does a pretty fair job. And I've used it to do that in a number of different ways. And you know, you make a couple of edits, but at the end of the day, it does a much better job than I could do myself. So,
right.
You know, that's a really simple way of using it, but we'll get into some of the more interesting stuff in a bit.
Well, to your point, as I was preparing for this, I've been reading and playing with it myself. I said, okay, the prompts are very key. That's what I'm sure you probably get into that. The prompts are very critical. And I did the exact same thing that you did, a couple of versions of it. And I said, I'm looking for an agenda for a webinar with a digital expert on recruiting and how AI is impacting that. What are the appropriate questions to ask? And sure enough, it not only listed the questions, some of which I had, but some that I didn't, and then it had the answers into it as well. So I'm incorporating some of this here today with you all. And like you, use it to write letters and various stuff. And even our firm is beginning to look into some of the applications for this as well. But I can go back to our next question here to kind of frame it. So I remember back in, 06 or 07, That's 2006 and 7, not 1906 and 07 for some of those staffers I'm working with here. But I remember with search engine optimization, it was always, I remember you saying, you want to write an article for the search engine, not for the human. And there were a lot of things that you needed to kind of train yourself to do and to present it in a particular way so that your organic search would come up more frequently to that point. So if I know maybe a little bit more about SEO than AI, it seems similar to a certain degree, or could have that impact on the way people are learning and finding out information, but it's also vastly different. So can you maybe tell us how the two technologies are similar and different?
Yeah, so that was in 2006, which was eons ago in the world of search engine optimization, because nowadays we actually write for the user and not for the search engine. Because search engines, through related technologies and large language models and researching content, and how do we understand what people mean when they say things the way they say them, Google has become more of an implicit search engine. So it's trying to understand meaning by what you type in there or what you say if you're doing a voice search. Versus back in 2006, it was an explicit search engine and very heavily relied on keywords and exactly what you typed in, and it had to be in the article. And so there was a lot, there was a very prescriptive way. Now we can write for humans and still accomplish the same thing. But how is AI different? So we got into researching large language models about 4 years ago, because we can see that the search engines are using large language models in an attempt to understand what do people mean when they type or say something into a search. When someone searches for Java, do they mean coffee? Do they mean a programming language, or do they mean the island in the South Pacific? If you are searching for a chocolate lab, well, that's what does that mean, right? And so there's different ways that they use language and understand concepts and connect the dots in meaning and intent. And so we were studying large language models in an attempt to better understand how do we influence the search engines on behalf of our customers. And so the search engines are using large language models and AI. Google has Bard as their chat tool, to better understand what people are searching for and what people want, and how do they answer those questions in a meaningful way. So AI and tools like ChatGPT and generative AI are changing the landscape of SEO. So it's definitely, they're two very different things, but they're part of, in my world at least, they're very much interconnected. And search engines, the landscape of if you search for something now, you get the very typical search results page. It has some ads, it has some some organic results, maybe some images and videos mixed in, depending on what you're searching for, maybe a map. I think that's gonna change a lot. And if people are asking a question, the search engines are starting to work toward giving the answer actually in the search result page, because all along the search engines, they're advertising companies. They're making their money on ad revenue. Right. They don't want, every time someone leaves the search engine page, that's a lost opportunity, right? So if they can keep you there, which has been their intent all along, then, and give you the answers you want, then there's much more opportunity for them to make money. And so they're going to start presenting answers within the search results, which will be really interesting in how that changes. And so now, and I'm getting ready to stop, but so now we as an agency are looking at how do we influence large language models. So, in back in the day, all the way up to now, it's how do we influence search engines. But now that we know that they're incorporating large language models, it's how do we influence a large language model's generative output to mention our client versus someone else. So we're spending a lot of research and dollars trying to figure that out. But anyway,
all right, that's it. Now, now we've set it up, because now we're getting right into it. So let's take, for instance, recruiting and talent. You hear these folks saying, I can't find anybody. I can't find these young people. It's not working on Handshake. It's hard to get through it. Indeed, I can't get my candidates I want. I can't seem to feel like it, all this stuff is where I can't find people right now. And I know we've talked about this in the past about, just talent in general and variety of things. You've talked about some clients you've tried to help and with this and so forth. But how do you think this is going to transform recruiting and hiring talent in the future?
Well, I mean, in a certain sense, it's like a lot of industries. It's gonna be a big change in how data is accessed and how data is incorporated into your day-to-day activity, and it's also going to influence your day-to-day job. And I know that's a question that's coming up, so I'll wait on that one. But as far as some of the things, I mean, some of the ways, honestly, I just saw someone, a colleague the other day who's left his job and is looking for a new job. Extremely talented person, posted on LinkedIn how frustrated he was with a particular online recruitment platform, that they were mismatching his careers have been with jobs. So he's getting all these job suggestions that have nothing to do with his skill set or experience. And it was for him, it was really frustrating. It's like, here's actually a very well-known, if I name dropped him, who it was, company who can't even with today's technology, can't even match him up with the right kind of jobs. So with AI, and generative models, especially, so take a step back. Tools like ChatGPT right now, again, they aren't necessarily real-time searchers. They're basing their output on stuff they've already consumed, so they're not that great at up-to-date information. They're getting better at it, but one of the ways that a tool like ChatGPT is really going to influence recruiting is being able to be retrained. So we already do this. So like I said, we've been working with algorithms like GPT for years before ChatGPT came out, and retraining a model it's helpful in order to have the model change its behavior. And you can train it to write like your customer writes. You can retrain it on a different set of data. So I can see recruitment companies coming together with their databases. Well, maybe not coming together, but folks within a single recruitment agency coming together with all their data and creating generative models based on that they can then use to write better job descriptions, to conduct better searches for talent based on their own data. If you think of like, you can take all the successful job placements that you've done versus those that have failed, right? You place someone and then 3 months later, the company doesn't like them and they're gone. And you can have the model study the differences between the people who were successfully placed and those who weren't, to help you sort of sort and rank candidates based on their profiles and history. And you could pull in their social media stuff and analyze that. And the generative models can then do some predictive analysis and some other things. So that's one way that I could really see this changing. On the job searcher side, same thing, having systems that are better at targeting them, being able to communicate with them much more effectively. A lot of recruitment folks have smaller staffs, and so using a tool like ChatGPT to skip over kind of the monkey work, if you will, of day-to-day tasks that you just that repetitive, iterative tasks that you just have to do because no one else can do it, and you've only got 2 people on staff that can even think about that. And
right.
You can use a tool like ChatGPT or other generative AI to do a lot of these tasks for you. So
yeah, which saves a lot of time.
It does,
no doubt. And we hear a lot about the initial stage of the recruitment process, how AI can really help with that. We've even seen some vendors that have reached out to some of our founders showing what some of this can do on the front end of that. But there's also other impacts to this. So one company is a guy that I know. It's called Life Brand. I don't know if you ever heard of this company, but basically they have this AI technology that can go into anyone's social media channels and flag inappropriate content. And then they will ask you to remove the content and clean up your image or reputation. So with this, how is a candidate's brand or an employer brand, how are they going to need to monitor that moving forward with this technology that's out there? How are they going to be able to present themselves in the most positive way?
Yeah, I mean, if people should already be doing this, right? I mean, if you are one of these types of people who gets really angry and says things on social media, and then 10 minutes later you're fine and you forget about it, right? That you probably should go back and clean that stuff up. Because I mean, we've in our own recruiting have found highly qualified people, but then when you start doing a little bit more homework, you're like, that doesn't seem like the right fit for our team, right? It's not, we're not hiring them because of what they said necessarily, but that the way they say things or the way they're engaging in social media just doesn't feel like a cultural fit. So, I think using a tool like LifeBrand, or I'm sure there'll be a lot of competitors for it if there aren't already, to sort of monitor that. I can see a company like the exact opposite type of company for recruiters, right? That has an API connection to your recruitment platform, and it can do some different sentiment analysis, right? It can flag things that are troublesome. So you can have it, you can plug in your recruits social media platforms, it starts scanning that, and it gives you a general sentiment of, is this person generally positive, neutral, or negative poster? Which can give you some information. Do they post about controversial issues, which is subject to interpretation, right? Like what's controversial for one company is not for another, but you can define like, well, here's the things that I find really off-putting. So, if you're a super progressive company or a super conservative company, you can see where those things might go, right? And that can sort of behind the scenes kind of influence the recruitment process as well. So there's just a lot. I mean, there's so many things. We're just at the nascent bleeding edge of this. We're talking about like, and how we're using it now is so simple compared to what it can be later on.
That's right. And for those of you that are on the call right now, please submit your questions. If there's anything we've talked about yet, or something we haven't talked about yet, please submit that. We'll get that to Marty. We'll definitely bring that up.
And don't worry about it doesn't need to be super complicated. I know nothing about repairing cars. So just because you know nothing about generative AI or ChatGPT, it's fine. Ask away.
I don't know anything about either. So that's why I ask a lot of questions here. But yeah, folks that have been on the recruiting side or staffing side, and they've maybe there's something that either background check, drug testing didn't really come up with, and you happen to be perusing social media, doing that channel, things pop up. So yeah, I think that is going to come up, and vice versa for the candidate, for the employer brand as well. So one of the things with AI that people are really concerned about, and you touched on this a little bit before, I don't like this thing. It's gonna take away my job. It's going to be bad for the economy and for people. They're going to be doing what I'm doing, being trained to do right now. Will jobs be eliminated, transformed, created? A little bit of all. What do you see related to that topic?
Yeah, I was going to say yes if you didn't say or a little bit of all. Yeah, certainly jobs will be eliminated, but my opinion is that it's not that certain types of roles in certain industries will become unnecessary, more, and other types of jobs will become more commoditized. Things that we pay a lot of money for now will be a commodity, with generative AI, because we can have that do it for us. Things like, certain things like graphic design, generative AI, you can, with the right tool, you can feed it some inputs and it will create an image for you. So there's certain things that are going to be changed or transformed. but the jobs that I think are going to be eliminated aren't, it's going to be those people who don't embrace the change, which is, it's not that it's which is almost always true in certain industries, right? If you are unadaptable, you can't, you become less and less useful to your employer. And so, you know, learning how to use generative AI will help you keep your job because you can become more efficient. Imagine where, you know, 3 or 4 hours of your daily work can be accomplished in half an hour with generative AI. And now you become more valuable because you can get more done in the same period of time. So, you know, I think that's the main story for most people is learn to use tools like ChatGPT, because then you do become more valuable. And the types of jobs that are going to be created are those where people know how to use this tool and can become super efficient. I mean, certainly there's going to be a lot more middle technical type roles. So you need people who really understand how large language models work and how to extract what you need out of that. So I can see more companies hiring people directly for those types of roles where it becomes much more about manipulating the output and how do you pull out what you need, how do you retrain without having to be a sophisticated software engineer. And so as these tools mature, you'll start seeing those types of roles come open as well. But for the average person like me and you, the biggest thing is that, like, how do we make more use of the tools to become more efficient and to become better? For us, it's the same, right? Because other agencies we've been using this for 4 years, but now, and so that was our kind of cutting edge, is we can get 5 times of the amount of work done as the typical agency. So it's stretched our client's dollar. That playing field is leveling out a bit, right? Now that people have ChatGPT, maybe now they can get a little bit closer to what we can do. But you know, it's yeah, I mean, that's the main story is learn to use it. You don't have to be able to do amazing things, but you want to become more efficient and provide more value. I think this is the main story there.
Right. It's the same thing that, like, when social media was coming out, people, you know, they're just on there saying what bowl of cereal they had for breakfast. You know, people weren't really seeing the impact that can make when it you know, first came out, or they just weren't comfortable with it. Same thing with websites and newspapers. And I mean, yeah, there's going to be an impact to that, to certain industries, to certain jobs and so forth. But to your point, by embracing it, you can incorporate it to your existing job, you create new sectors and so forth to just be more productive and efficient and effective. So this next bullet here is, and before we do that, if I have a question here from Eric. Hey, Eric, how are you doing today? Appreciate you hopping on with us, buddy. What are you hearing? This is for you, Marty. What are you hearing or perhaps anticipating from AI tools in terms of being the decision maker in the hiring process? So what we said before, this mostly AI has been using at that front end to kind of evaluate candidates and so forth. Well, what about in terms of being decision making? Eric, I'm going to go through some of that in these bullet points as well, but Marty, your initial reaction to Eric's question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think, you know, some of the things I can see is I can see the length of time from the initial recruitment start to final decision making being shortened, because you can use these tools to skip over a lot of the more manual type of work. But when it ultimately comes to making a decision, I see the tools really, you know, by allowing other existing recruitment tools to access data through APIs and things like that, you can get a more I think you're just going to get a better analysis. And I think one thing I can see is going back to that sentiment analysis. So we're looking at what is this, you know, how does this person convey themselves online? What can we discern from how what they've written to us in, you know, a cover letter or in their resume or communications by email? All of this stuff can be sucked in, right? We can look at papers maybe they've written for certain types of roles. Anything that's available online, we can pull in and we can start to look at pros and cons, right? So, wow, this person is super smart. They've they seem to be, the AI can extract topics that they seem to be a very high level expert on based on their writing and how they, whatever. And then, we can look at, but it says that they frequently criticize their employer, right? We don't need to see every post, but it's like 10 times this year they've complained about their job. Well, what does that say about them? All this sort of stuff can be bubbled up, right, in the decision process. So it's not that you wouldn't have necessarily had this information before, but again, it makes it easier to gather this information and analyze it. So you can spend less time examining more information, right? So things that you wouldn't have had the time to do in the past, like reviewing articles that they've written or research that they've done, you can have the generative AI do that for you and provide you a summary and what topics they seem to really talk about a lot and those kinds of things. So I see probably a lot of the tools incorporating different types of analyses like that.
So one of the things related to how this may change the workplace dynamic is some people have felt that by using more generative AI is that you're going to eliminate bias from, say, the decision-making process of employees. You're already shaking your head there, right? But Jessica, who's a teammate of ours at ROCS, sent a great article just a little bit before this to kind of help with the discussion here. And I forget the source. If Jessica's on, she can type it in the chat. I can share it. But it was basically saying, that's not the case. That people are feeling like that it's even worse bias toward them by using AI-related functions in terms of the job search process. Do you see the bias going down, or is it actually going to go up?
I think it could go either way. And it also means, what do we mean by bias? It is biased, but it's not necessarily a negative thing. We all have different opinions, and so that's a bias in one way or the other. It also, with generative AI, these types of tools, the tool is biased based on its input. Whatever input it's studied, whatever bias might be present there is going to bias the tool. And so, early on when ChatGPT was released and it was saying some really crazy stuff, right? And you could get it to, like, people will just say experimenting in a naughty fashion, trying to make it sound like a horrible person or someone who's a racist, right? It could go there because of what it had been trained on. And so, if we train our tools with better content that is less biased, I don't know that we can ever get to a zero bias point, but it's certainly, we can try, then you're going to eliminate a lot of the bias. But there's also a lot of nuance in hiring, right? And so, the tools are never going to be able to pick up on, like, the gut check, like something about this applicant just doesn't seem right, or this person, they don't present well in their resume and cover letter, but man, they seem, when we interviewed them, they were amazing. That the AI tools are not going to be able to pick up on those kind of things. But going back to bias, I think that's the main thing, is understanding the model that it's trained on, right? So with ChatGPT, without retraining it, it's going to have bias because of what it's studied. But if we feed it better content in, better content out, is going to be the story there.
So moving on to plagiarism that comes up, the young people in college and high school now, they kind of figure this stuff out and they start writing the papers for them using ChatGPT. Last year, we're hearing a lot about that. Yeah. And how do the schools stop it? But even in a company, how do you not necessarily prevent, use it for your effectiveness and efficiency tool, but what if you use something that legal is going to have a problem with, or it's going to be a liability down the road with using some of this? How do you need to disclaim that the information is not necessarily coming from you, but is being assisted through a ChatGPT?
I mean, I think that companies just have to explicitly say, this is not permissible for this task. But to say you can't use it at all, to me, seems really dumb if you're a company, because if your employees can be more efficient and achieve the same result, why wouldn't you want to do that? Using a prescriptive tool like this. However, there's a great instance early on with ChatGPT. So these tools are also studying our prompts and how we correct them. So that's the interesting thing about ChatGPT is you can give it a prompt and it does it, and then you can say, oh wait, I didn't, and you can add a new prompt to say, actually, can you rewrite it this way or do this? And so it's consuming all of that to understand us better. And so the point that I'm getting to is that early on, Amazon had to come down on their software engineers and tell people to stop using ChatGPT to write software, because a lot of Amazon's proprietary code was getting consumed by ChatGPT and being used in answers to non-Amazon people. And so people were getting code from Amazon that Amazon obviously didn't want them to have. And so in instances like that, I think it's completely appropriate. Like, hey, you're a software engineer, you shouldn't use a public data set like that to do your work. Now, if I was Amazon, what I would do is write my own large or create my own large language model, or use a private version of ChatGPT that's not going back out to the public. Because absolutely, I want my software engineers to be able to write code 5 times faster. Why wouldn't I want that? But I just don't want my data out there. So with companies, it's just going to take some understanding of the power of the tool and the implications of using it, and then setting rules around that. But as far as college students, like, the cat is out of the bag there, right?
Yeah.
My answer to that is that our education system, it's controversial. Our education system, the way we educate people, is not good. And so, we teach people to check boxes and to answer questions and then forget about it 5 days later. We're not teaching people to retain information. And so to expect, and under a model like that, and people can argue with me about it, but under a model like that, not to expect people to use shortcuts, to me, just seems a hopeless endeavor. They're going to use it. I think, again, with the same example with employers, I think professors and universities have to say, you cannot use it in this instance. And if we catch you using it for this, then there will be repercussions. And college students need to understand that these tools fingerprint their content output. You can detect it. And so, so there needs to be times when it's okay to use it if you're a busy college student. And then there's going to be times when, no, you actually need to do the hard work on this one, because we want to see what you're capable of without the tool. And if you, anyway, I'll stop there.
So that's great. That's great. So segueing to that of college students, a lot of talk with AIs about you're basically creating a new virtual assistant to help you. There was a trend of basically having folks overseas, cheaper labor rate, to be kind of your personal digital assistant. So when you go to bed, you give folks their tasks, take advantage of the time change. You come back the next morning, boom, everything is done. Will virtual assistants eliminate internships? You think about it, because some of these things that interns come to do are very repetitive, repetition and so forth. They just need some extra bodies. How does the student get experience with virtual assistants can do a lot of this, the tasks that they were doing?
Well, for virtual assistants, I think tools like ChatGPT are a sea change for them, right? So now they can take on more work and get it done just as efficiently. For interns, I think the answer there is it depends, right? Like, if you're a company and you're bringing on interns just because you need somebody to do the monkey work, then that kind of job is definitely something a virtual assistant can most likely do, unless it's assembling something right in person, and then obviously they can't do that. But if it's data type work or computer type work, it can definitely be farmed out. If you're the type of company that brings on interns because you're trying to train them up to hire them into an entry-level position later, then clearly that's the instance. Like, if you're an intern, those are the kind of jobs you should be looking for anyway. If you're wanting to work in that field, obviously some people are doing it to earn money, and then that's okay. Like, that's different. But if you're wanting to get a job at the end of your internship, then looking for the types of companies that aren't going to be farming out that work is still the way you should do it, but definitely
Right.
post ChatGPT and virtual assistant.
So one other thing about, from a recruiter standpoint, most companies have applicant tracking systems where they're monitoring all the people that are coming in and applying to roles and so forth. And you mentioned this a little bit earlier about how this generative AI or maybe existing organizations are out there could basically go through an entire database of people that you have and try and find that exact match.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, I don't know if you have any clients that are in that recruiting space or applicant tracking systems, but is this being done right now by any of your clients?
So we don't have any clients that would be developing that kind of system. Certainly, our clients use systems like that. I mean, these companies, I mean, you folks who are on this call, if you're a customer, that you should be demanding it. Like this is something we need. And the tools that develop this the quickest and the best are going to leap ahead of their competitors. You think about a tool like HubSpot, right? If you're not familiar with it, it's a customer relationship tool.
Yeah, we use that. Yes.
Okay, yeah. Leapfrogged over everyone else when it came out because it was innovative, it was better, and whatnot. So, integrating a new, integrating for integration's sake is not great. It's not a great experience. People are not going to understand what this is doing and how it's used. But if you do it in a way that works really well, it's easy to understand, and it's more of a seamless integration to existing flows, then I think that's the winning ticket there for an applicant tracking system. But yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay. Well, again, if you have any questions, please go ahead and chat them in. We've got a couple more here that I'm going to ask, but would really like any questions of topics that maybe you've thought about and we haven't discussed yet. And so maybe this is one, is that what should a recruitment manager or HR representative or just anybody that's on the call, what should they be doing right now? Like actively doing to stay up to speed on this so they're not behind?
If you've not used ChatGPT, go sign up for it, sign up for a free account and use it. And then think about what are some things that I do every day that, maybe this thing could do for me quicker, more efficiently. And just start experimenting with it. The more that you experiment with it, the more you'll realize what it's actually capable of. Again, an example. So I mentioned early on this acquisition that we're doing. One of the lender that we were working with early on asked us to write a summary of how this acquisition would benefit both companies, and in the theme of the overall trend of digital marketing in general. And so I wrote a prompt that was about two paragraphs. I mean, yeah, it was about 2 paragraphs long, specifically outlining. Now, this, by the way, this comes after having done this sort of work for the last 20 years and having already experimented a bit with ChatGPT. So,
right,
it wasn't my first time using it.
Yeah.
But I wrote a prompt, a couple paragraphs, told it, who I was. I actually gave it the names of the companies, my name. I gave it like maybe 10 bullet points that I wanted it to cover. Like, here's the bullets that I want you to write about. Here's, I actually copied and pasted a trend report from another website. I'm like, here's the digital marketing trend that you need to write, include in this. And then I had it write an outline. I said, now produce an outline of this document that I'm looking for. And it was, 20 seconds I had it. It took me way longer to write the prompt
to actually
get the output.
Right.
So now I have an outline. And so I can look at the outline and I can say, okay, I don't like that thing. So I said, eliminate, item D. And, oh, you didn't mention this, whatever that was, include that, and then rewrite the whole outline. And so then it would, right? And then I said, okay, now for section A, write a couple of paragraphs about section A, section B, section C, section D. I didn't like that one. Rewrite that one and make sure you do it this way. You can tell it to write like Shakespeare if you really want to, and it will. But you know, you get the idea. So something that probably would have taken me several days to put together, I was able to accomplish in 2 hours. So things, I mean, you just, all the things that you think about, do I really want to sit down and do this? No, I don't, because it's just something that some banker is going to look at 20 seconds and be like, this sounds smart. And then that's it. So I don't want to spend all that time on something, you know, I want it to be good, right? In case someone looks at it, but I don't want to spend my time in case no one does. So I gave it what I felt like it was an appropriate amount of time, and then it created it, and I moved on. And I've done that. I'm writing a post-acquisition business plan that's going to be probably like 50 pages. And I would say 70% of it will be written by generative AI. You know, so you can start off with simple things like write me an email. You know, here's our typical email reply to a candidate's, you know, a candidate's first inquiry. Rewrite this for me, you know, based on the best recruitment letters out there, you know, you can just experiment. And if you don't like your first result, you don't have to tell it to do it over again. You just tell it what you didn't like and ask it to rewrite it, and it will. So anyway, I'm rambling on at this point, but go do simple things, learn how to use it, and then your abilities there will grow. It's not hard. If you can use Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, you can use ChatGPT. It's not hard.
And we all know how time intensive recruiting is from an employer or candidate standpoint. And maybe some of these activities by using this could be reduced. If I'm a job seeker, I can cast a wider net, I can write more cover letters, whatever the case may be, or I can have different versions of my resume that are specific to an industry, or I can do a better job of finding the candidates that I'm, you know, really looking for. So I think that's very helpful from a individual practical standpoint. So what about organizations or companies now? I mean, think about your clients. If they've, you know, been with you for a while and they start asking you questions, you know, what advice would you give a company or organization that's not really up to speed on what's happening now, have read some of the news articles and so forth? What should they be actively doing as a company to embrace and get ahead of this?
Well, I think first of all, you need to think about who within your business are the best communicators and the most savvy on the computer. And hopefully you've got a couple of people who are both.
Now, why you say that?
Well, and so I'm getting that. And so what I would task those people with learning how to use tools like ChatGPT, do research, and then start thinking about how can we use this in our communication process? What are some other ways that we can use this? And the reason I say the best communicators is because they're going to probably write the best prompts the quickest. And so because the better the prompt that you give the tool, the better the output is and the more specific it's going to be. Once those people understand how to use it and can see some of the trends and some of the ways within your own company culture and processes that it might be useful, then they can start sort of championing that internally, right? And coming up with ways. And then, you know, the ultimate solution may be beyond their skill set, but at least they can see the potential within your own, you know, cloud of stuff that you have going on. And then from there, you can hire a consultant, or you can look for software that can accomplish these things for you. That's what I mean. That's what I would do if I was, you know, a company that had never used it and was, maybe you're feeling a bit intimidated by it, or you're just looking to squeeze more juice from the lemon. That's there's so many different ways. Like, I mean, it's a time-saving device, right? So you can squeeze more profit, more margin out of what you currently have, because now your employees can do more.
That's right.
In a shorter period of time. But on the same hand, with like recruitment, you can get from point A to point B faster. You can You can use the AI to communicate more effectively, to communicate more quickly. You can also use it to evaluate, your applicants. So, what do you want to know about them, and so on. But I saw Eric asked a really good question, and it's sort of related to this. So,
Yeah,
you want to segue to that?
yeah. Segue to it.
Yeah.
You're multitasking there, but this is for others that may not have seen this. Eric's saying, what are you hearing about potential legislation or compliance regulations around using AI tools in the hiring process? Eric says he's started seeing some language on different software tools, and he's paraphrasing here as AI is not used to make the hiring decision, or a human will be reviewing your application. It sounds like there are already some repercussions for going too far. What are you seeing around this phenomenon?
That's a good question. And what I would say about legislation is, and compliance, is that it will be years away. As is the case with most new technologies. I mean, it's by the time that the legislatures get around to regulating it, we've moved beyond the thing that they're regulating. So that's always been true.
Except for TikTok.
Except for TikTok, right? It's
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
no,
divert your
it's,
attention.
it's funny. But it's true. That's what makes it funny. That's what we're worried about is TikTok. Anyway, so the other question about going too far, and to me, those kinds of statements are the sort of thing that I feel like some attorneys wrote because they were worried about perception. But I'm pretty sure that recruitment agencies and employers are already using a lot of automated tools to make hiring decisions, particularly the larger companies, because you cannot review 1,000 applications for a single job. And so there are already automations making decisions and doing these things. What I think is, and I think people sort of always kind of known that was happening, but with the advent of a tool, with tools like this, it becomes much more in your face now that these things are possible and people are going to be using them. And so now there's, I think, the pressure to say something about it, just to avoid bad press at this point. I don't think there's much risk of any legislative issues. Regulatory, maybe if you're in a regulated industry, like we have clients that are in the energy space and they're regulated. And so I think regulations are more of the immediate concerns for a company like that, because regulations can come around more quickly than legislation can, or does. But even there, I mean, the bureaucratic process is a slow beast. So I wouldn't be that concerned about it in the short term at all. And, the main thing is, as long as you're using it for good, I think you're going to be on the safe side of how you're using that. And, if you're, I mean, clearly, if you're using it for nefarious purposes like discrimination, on people, then that's always going to fall on the bad side of how you're using it. But I think, I think most everyone that's here is here because they want to learn how to use it in better ways. And so, I think you're going to be fine as long as you stay on that side of the track.
Thank you, Marty. Appreciate your time. We're coming up on our limit here, but this is a great introductory conversation about what we can do and better help. Your information is there. You can just search it. I'm sure you're going to pop up first when you type in Marty Martin. Your contact information will be there. But if you have any interest in learning more about what Marty does for organizations, I'm sure he would be willing to talk to you more about it. Same for us here at ROCS. If you would like a complimentary conversation to talk about strategy and how do we navigate this sector of the market and what technologies are there, any member of our team would be glad to have a conversation with you. I know a number of our account managers reached out to you, invited you to come to this event. We will also provide the recording of this on our website. We'll get that out to you as well. Our next webinar, we have Greg Chimura from Chimura Economics is going to be providing some information and data, updated, fresh data that they have compiled on the demand of certificates and credentials for the regions in which we serve. That was one topic that some of our clients wanted to learn more about, and I'm excited to hear from Greg. We had to postpone it a little bit because he wanted to get the freshest data from what they were running to get to us. So we'll give you more information on when that is. We're getting some great responses, Marty. Thank you for this session. Great information that they really appreciate it. So thank you guys for coming and being here. Thank you again, Marty. Thanks everyone
My
for
pleasure.
joining, and we'll see you soon. Thanks so much.
Bye.